Hi everyone, and welcome to the second of 3W Media Tech Talks in partnership with Open Compute Project. We've got a great digital turnout today, and if this is your first time at a W Media event, welcome to our digital network. OCP's collaborative community has focused on redesigning hardware for efficient data center designs, enabling scalable computing. They have a solution to share with us today that will meet our growing data center needs, and that solution is open networking. In this Tech Talk, we will be taking a look at how you can transform your legacy systems with this innovative solution. My name's Stuart. I'm the editor at W Media, and you'll see me on our website producing the latest news and market insights on a broad range of technology topics. The need for flexibility and lower networking costs in data centers is constantly increasing. And if you tuned into W Media's webinar on digital transformation, you will know that this demand is growing even more, especially as we move into a cloud-enabled world. Our last Tech Talk with OCP focused on open source hardware, which you can watch on demand at w.media/webinar. And today we'll be focusing on another innovative solution designed to help you improve your infrastructures through open networking. And we'd love to hear from you. So please send in your questions or opinions at any time during the event by selecting the question mark icon in the GoToWebinar window. Please include your name, company, and job title in the question or opinion. So joining us today, we have OCP's VP of Channel, Steve Helvey. Steve educates organizations on the benefit of community-driven open hardware designs for data centers. We also have Bui Ban, the Business Development Vice President of EdgeCore Networks. EdgeCore is a leader in open networking and a top contributor to open source groups like OCP. Bui is the perfect person to speak on open networking, with more than 30 years of experience in telecommunications, media, and technology. We'll then hear from DC Connect's Jonathan Leung, the head of R&D, and Michael Rasko, the head of solutions. DC Connect is a pioneer in innovating on-demand global cloud connectivity. Jonathan leads a team of talented developers who have produced DC Connect solutions to enable telcos to be free from vendor lock-in and allow their networks to migrate to an OCP-based infrastructure. And Michael has extensive experience in project management, as well as designing and implementing technical solutions for telecommunication companies. On the agenda today, Steve will introduce us to the concept of open networking and how it has grown rapidly to account for 55% of bare metal switches sold in the data center market. Bui will then share more about the key benefits of open networking, overcoming transformation challenges, and leveraging on the expertise of vendors such as EdgeCore Networks. After that, we will hear a case study from DC Connect, an end user of open networking who have successfully transformed legacy systems into an agile open network using OCP solutions. Their story could be yours, so remember to get involved by sending in your questions. We'll then finish by delivering your questions to our speakers in a Q&A. So now it's time to get started. I'm ready to learn more about open networking, so it's over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate everybody taking the time today. There's one common theme you're going to hear throughout today's talk, and that is going to be the disaggregation of networking. And large companies have been disaggregating their network for many years, but it's moving rapidly into the enterprise space, as well as telco, public sector. And there's really three key reasons why we're seeing this. One is a reduction in CAPEX opportunity. Number two is driven by the increase in the SDN offerings, or software-defined networking offerings. And third is the rise in merchant-based silicon. These allow a lot more flexibility for organizations at the enterprise level. And as Stuart mentioned in his introduction, when people are moving toward this disaggregation model, they are moving toward an OCP-based switch, open compute hardware, which has been open sourced at the specification level and at the design file level, and then having multiple manufacturers make a product based off of that same specification. That's the impetus behind the Open Compute project, started by Facebook in 2011 with founding board member companies of Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, Intel, and Rackspace. And just last week, we are very, very happy to announce that Google has joined the board of the Open Compute project. We have over 150 companies working on common problems across the data center, 190 contributions, 6,000 engineers across 15 to 20 different projects. Our projects span everything from server, rack and power, storage, telco, edge, but today we're going to focus a lot on open networking. It's one of our fastest growing projects, and I'm really excited today to have Bowie from EdgeCore speak about this topic in more detail. So EdgeCore is the #1 contributor of open networking designs that we have in the community. So they've been a long-time partner of Open Compute and member, and they're showing leadership. So they help lead regional communities. They have a seat on our technical steering committee, and they're working side by side with other networking vendors. And so they're not just a vendor in this space, but they're showing leadership and stewardship of the direction of open networking. So with that, Bowie, I'll turn it over to you to share a bit more on open networking.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining. On this slide, I actually just going to go back, I guess, to give you a very high level, answers to what is open networking. So on the left-hand side, I think for most of the data center networking and enterprise would actually know that you buy a box with software and hardware integrated with a particular brand on it. This is what we call traditional black box, which is integrated both hardware and software. And over the years, there are some of these vendors actually starting to use open source software and networking solutions such as Open Network Linux and some others to actually implement it a little bit more disaggregated. And they start calling this a white box. But it's not a fully open networking. And what we're talking today is about open networking where the hardware itself is open source. And this is where the true disaggregation comes from. You can implement a traditional, vendor network software on top of this open source hardware. You can also do the same thing with open source software. And on the most right-hand side are some of the communities in sister communities, if you want to call it that way, with open compute projects. Including the telecom infrastructure project, which is more focusing on the solution providing for the telecom sector. And ONF is more on the SDN and open wireless solution. And then when Steve talked about enterprise, there's a community where we start to working with that just formed under the open under the Linux Foundation on what's called DENT, which is actually more focusing on solutions more aligned with the enterprise requirements. So you have a look at, you understand what is open networking now, and you ask people why would they want to go open networking. Really, open networking is allow our customers to have the maximum freedom of choice, where they don't have to buy software and hardware and services from the single vendor. They can pick and choose the solutions on both hardware or software based on what they need and prevent the vendor lock-in. Because it's open source, they have a choice to actually choose the vendor which they want to work with, and actually over the time they can actually choose a better solution that fit their needs. So, and the migration and the change will be a lot easier. And this is fully under the control, right? You don't have to, go into one solutions and actually found that, take a lot of effort and cost to change. So it's under the control of the customers. And you don't have to wait for innovations where both software and hardware need to align to your need. You can actually choose the right software with the current hardware, or with the new hardware using the same software, through all this community involvement, and develop the solution that you need. And a lot of these drive also that they will enable a better total cost of ownership. So I would actually now tell you a little bit about the pioneer company I'm working for, called EdgeCore Networks. So EdgeCore Network is a daughter company or fully owned subsidiary of a long-running ODM that been around for more than 30 years. We've been around for about 10 years now, right? To basically help to drive the product that Acton produce into the market. And we've been actually working into open compute projects, and as one of the early adopter to produce a lot of the assembly platform for the community to use, and to actually to start deploying and to start using that around the world, starting with the data centers, and then recent is over the last 5 years, telecom operators and enterprise starting to come on board to actually start disaggregating their solution, their network, and actually adopting this open networking concept. So I would go now to talk a little bit about what contribution we have made. So as Steve has alluded to, we have been, around, with open network, open compute project for a long time. We've contributing more than 17, OCP accepted design. So all our design is actually now available on the open compute website. The difference between the three, open the open OCP accepted design, OCP inspired design, is this. Open OCP accepted design is the design that we actually have contribute, and all our designs is available for people to look at. And this is on this slide, you will see, our contribution to OCP, ranging from the 1G switch all the way to the most recent 400 gig spine, and also the photonic switch, which is a disaggregated DWDM system. And also we've been contributing the telecom products, including aggregations and core switches and the cell side router. I want to tell you a little bit about those things, especially the cell side router, where most recently a few of the telco, including very publicly Telefonica, have decided and to use our cell side router for the 5G deployment. And there's many more actually working on this right now, but we are not ready to make that public announcement with the customer. So, the reason why we actually want to, go and contribute our design, and apart from actually believing in the open source, movement, is to allow us to have the biggest and strongest software ecosystem. And of course, the software, you can have many choices on our platform. You can have the commercial source software that actually, can fit into data center, telecom carrier or enterprise, or you can actually choose the open source. Data center, for example, of a company called Cumulus Networks, where this is one of the software that you will hear later on from DC Connect. They have adopted to use on their data center. But also, the same platform, you can choose to use open source. Sonic, for example, is one of the hottest topic on the market today. Sonic was a network operating system used by Microsoft and contributed as an open source to the Linux Foundation. And that platform, for example, has been actually tested and validated with all the software shown here. Again, these are not the only software that we have or software partner that we have. There are others, but these are under other the bigger list that we can discuss. We actually choose to contact us. Okay. If you do want to try this though, there's many different ways. Some of our customers actually, choose to bring the platform into their labs, but that's not the only way that you can do that. You can actually go to the OCP marketplace and pick, out some of our flight cases that can, you can adopt. And these are the ones that pre-integrated with software into a system that align to a use cases. The one on the right-hand top is the GPON, for example, platform, and the bottom is the mobile rack and top of rack and spine platform. Or you can use one of our lab system, our headquarter labs can be opened up, and you can use that as lab as a service, to try your solutions on that. Okay, so I would now hand back to Steve to discuss the example and use cases where DC Connects have been utilizing some of these solutions to implement their network. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Vui. I appreciate it very much. And now for the real star of the show, Jonathan, Michael, thank you very much for making the time today. I think it's great to hear from organizations who've actually made this transformation, gone from traditional networking to the new way of doing networking. And Jonathan, Michael, why don't you, I'm sure there may be people in the audience who've never heard of DC Connect. So why don't you share a bit about your company and some of your core offerings?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Steve. This is Michael Rasco. I'm the head of solutions at DC Connect Global. DC Connect Global is a software-defined networking vendor/carrier with just south of 200 POPs on net throughout the Asia Pacific region, and the ability to reach more than 1,500 different data centers across the world through our partners, as well as cloud connections and all the other benefits that you see from the SDN market. So while we've been seeing folks at Cumulus and EdgeCore really focus on the disaggregation of the data center, we've tried to take those same principles and thoughts and move them into the telco space, where there has not been good penetration traditionally of the open source hardware and software.
Good. So that's interesting. So why don't you kind of start from the beginning, share with people what you were doing before and your estate, the way it looked several months ago.
Okay, yeah. So originally, so we had more than 120 POPs that are using H3C switches. So H3C is a company that used to be part of HP, and so they're running HP's Comware 7 NOS. So those H3C switches were able to meet our immediate need to hyperscale our network by programmatically creating and managing the VXLAN tunnels. So we were able to have many different products like the EVPL and the ELAN and E3, which are all MEF standards for data center connectivity. So we can do a point-to-point or point-to-multi-point. We can do a .1Q VLAN trunking or Q and Q with double tags. So we were able to achieve our immediate goals with the original state.
And Jonathan, what about some of the issues here that we have listed? Talk about some of the problems with the way things used to be.
Yes. So one of the things is that the H3C is using a proprietary hardware. So their switch is proprietary, and also the SDN controller is also provided by H3C. So it's a proprietary SDN controller solution, which they call AD-WAN. And because the switch itself is using the Conware 7 NOS, which we cannot swap out for another NOS because it's integrated to the switch. And so what the problem is with that is that it causes vendor lock-in. So we cannot deploy a solution with maybe multi-vendor, right? We cannot have a H3C switch, and then we cannot have a Cisco or some other brand of switch in the network, because the SDN controller is developed by H3C and only works with the H3C switches. And that leads to a limited feature set, which means that if we wanted to have some features that H3C that currently doesn't support, we will have to wait for H3C's pipeline. You know, when can they provide the feature that we need? And so for us, which is as a very agile company, the speed of development is not acceptable.
I understand. So now you made the move from this original state to the move to Edge Core and Linux. So talk us through that process and where you are today and some of the challenges with even the current implementation.
Sure. So when we went out initially looking for a new vendor, we looked at a lot of the traditional guys like Juniper and Arista. And as we started to dig deeper into the POCs, we realized that we were running into the same issues that we had with H3C. Now, these are all really great solutions and really great hardware, but as Jonathan mentioned, it just wasn't meeting the agility that we needed on our network and for our developers to be able to implement at the speed that we're used to. So what's really interesting about DC Connect is we're really a combination of network engineers and software engineers. So we're really looking at the network a bit differently. And what we found out was the Linux-based NOSes, they allow us to treat the network more like a piece of software. And rather than waiting on vendors to come out with new API calls or new feature sets, we could simply, take the source code, change it up, and add the features that we need, or write a simple script to execute the features that we wanted. So what we actually found ourselves doing is instead of adopting another, traditional carrier solution and their controller, we wrote our own controller that could talk to our legacy H3C devices, as well as talk to, the newer Linux NOSes. And the reason we settled on Edge Core and Cumulus, quite honestly, was the attention that was given to us. So as we were going through these processes with the more legacy vendors, we're a smaller company, so we weren't getting a huge outreach from these larger companies. Whereas when we approached Edge Core and Cumulus and told them what we were trying to do and what our vision was, quite quickly they, boxed up some switches and sent them to our new office that we just opened up in Hong Kong. And both Edge Core and Cumulus flew out some of their best engineers to support us and get hands-on and build out our proof of concept all over a weekend in our office here in the new territories. So we were really excited and really energized by the amount of attention and focus that we got from both Cumulus and Edge Core. So very appreciative of their partnership, and quite honestly, they helped hold our hand through the early days of getting onboarded on their system. When we first launched and first started buying boxes from Edge Core and the licenses from Cumulus, I don't think we had anybody certified on the platform. So it was really a learn as you go situation, and we had a lot of great people like Bowie on the Edge Core side. And on the Cumulus side, we had Satharson and Jason. They just were, great people helping us through the process. And, it's really opened our eyes to working in an open source fashion. And now, through this whole nexus, we've wound up working with OCP, and now we're learning a lot about Sonic. So, while we like the current state of our network, we're always looking to contribute more to the community and grow with the community as we move forward.
That's great. I did not know. So you had nobody actually certified on any of this hardware or software prior to taking the leap. That's pretty impressive. And the feedback pervasively across the EdgeCore team is they do approach end users with more of a community sort of mindset rather than a vendor customer relationship. So that's evidence here based on your feedback. So how long did this transition take? So from the time you decided we need to do something different to the time that we now have running EdgeCore and Cumulus, how long was that process?
So it's been a transition over the past year, but initially what we did is we switched about a year ago to all new POPs being deployed using the Cumulus EdgeCore combo. So that was pretty much immediate, just a matter of a few months. And now we're going through and replacing the hardware on some of our legacy POPs. But with the current economic state, that's obviously been slowed down a little bit. But the transition was quite smooth. The hardest part was what I mentioned earlier, was how do you get a network engineer to think like a software engineer, and how do you get a software engineer to think like a network engineer? So that's really been the big, pivot for us. And it's, at first it was a challenge, but it ended up being a net positive, because we found our network engineers are learning more about the software side of the world, and our software engineers are learning more about the network. So this whole transition to Linux, which is a platform that I've always been a huge fan of, and been on it since I can remember, is that with the Linux, the software is the network, and the network is the software. You pretty much have a big Linux server with 48 port NIC on it. So that's what's so great about it. And there's such a scarcity of developers or network engineers that know both. We think we're really leading the market in developing our people and taking guys right out of university and training them up on how to think, both on the network side and on the software side.
Well, speaking of people, how big is the team that you put on this project? Because some people think, well, only the big guys do open networking because they have a lot of people. I'm a smaller company, I don't have very many, so I need to do traditional stuff. So how many people do you have on your team? How many people are dedicated to this transformation?
So it's surprising. For the transformation, it was probably less than a dozen people that we had dedicated on this project. But we're very fortunate to have a great R&D team that Jonathan leads. So if to anyone that's thinking about making the jump, it may seem scary at first, especially if you have no Linux experience. But talk to your younger guys, talk to the new devs on your team, and some of our biggest assets on this have been the guys that we have that are straight out of university, that they're still in that learning mode, and they know a lot more about the modern architecture.
That's great. So as you're interacting with other people, say in the OCP community or other companies you come across, what is your opinion of the overall appetite for open networking across Asia? And what recommendations would you give to people starting to think about this, other than, say, talk to the young guys?
So I think the uptake, especially in the Asia Pac market, has been a little bit slow, and there's two reasons because of that. There is some fear of the unknown and the fear of Linux, and there's also a little bit of pushback that you'll see within organizations where you have people that have traditionally lived in a CCIE hierarchy, and they don't necessarily want to take themselves out of consideration. So there's pushback from engineering and there's pushback from management sometimes. But the best thing you can really do is just go onto Cumulus's website, and you can spin up a virtual lab, or if you have a hypervisor or a good server that you can do some virtualization in, you can pull down all the CL demo labs, and Cumulus does a really good job at walking you through how to do it. So one thing that we've actually seen traditionally, we came out with this idea to build a really kick-ass SDN platform throughout Asia Pac and throughout the world. But what we quickly realized is, rather than going out and trying to build this all on our own, it's better to partner with carriers in the region to help enable this transformation. So we've partnered with some carriers here in Hong Kong and have brought every major data center in Hong Kong on net on our SDN platform. at the same time enabled their legacy telco network and helped ease their engineers into being comfortable with the Linux and working with the open source platform, which traditionally the big hardware vendors treated white box equipment like the boogeyman. They would do everything they could to scare the customer out of making the move to this open architecture. So really, I think the biggest net gain is, if this is something you're interested in getting into, reach out to OCP, reach out to us, reach out to, EdgeCore or Cumulus. And there are plenty of people that are happy to talk to you about this and probably not even charge you for it, because a lot of us are just nerds that really love Linux.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of this really goes back to, is just a massive love of Linux.
That's right. The community is certainly available for anybody out there that has any questions. So what's next for DC Connect as you look at your entire infrastructure, whether it be more open hardware or more expansion regionally? What are some of what's next for you, for your team?
Okay. Yeah, so now that the separation of the hardware and software is made possible through the open networking, I believe not only will the data center become more disaggregated, but also the cloud will become more and more important as the place to build a virtual network functions. So with the OCP technologies like Sonic, we'll be able to automate both the creation of the VNFs and also the connectivity between them. So with the cloud, anyone can build a virtual data center using the cloud resources from, say, North America, from Europe, and also from developing economies in Asia and Africa. So you can use this to power a CDN or a VPN service, for example. And of course, more recently, we've all seen the explosion of teleconferencing applications like Zoom due to COVID-19. And so by purchasing the cloud resources as close as possible to the clients, we can minimize the latency, which will enhance the video and the audio quality. And so I think in that fashion, OCP technologies are going to open up many markets in the developing economies. The idea that the network resources can be bought and sold in from anywhere to anywhere without any physical restrictions, which is going to revolutionize the networking industry, just like AWS and Azure have done the same thing for compute and storage. So OCP and DC Connect will be at the forefront of that new wave.
I agree. So Jonathan, Michael, thank you very much. It's as I mentioned earlier, it's great to hear from someone that's actually been through the process, what went well, what didn't, and really appreciate your insight and some of the key themes that you're driving across your customers and across Asia. So thank you both again. For those of you in the audience that's never been to our website, please feel free to get on. There's a lot of information on our website. We have an entire marketplace that does profile both the products and the specifications that Bowie mentioned. You can also go on to Cumulus's website as well, and they have, as Michael had mentioned, Cumulus in the cloud, which allows you to spin up a virtual instance quite quickly. Locally across APAC, we have several ways that you can reach out to people that do open networking. On the left-hand column, you can see EdgeCore, EPS Global is an EdgeCore partner, Starview in Singapore is an EdgeCore partner, CTC in Singapore and across Asia is an EdgeCore partner as well, and Cumulus contact information and Open Computing in Singapore as well. If you have time and you want to hear more details around DC Connect's implementation of open networking, you can jump onto our website. We had our virtual summit last week with over 10,000 people registered at the event, where Jonathan gave a speech within the open networking case studies track. So there's the link there. You can download the deck later and join the Open Compute Virtual Summit. There's a lot of other open networking tracks that may be of interest to you, including Sonic tracks, Sonic panels from some of the top tiered enterprises around the world talking about their implementation of Sonic. So use this link, go in, the sessions will be live for many months, and I recommend that you check a few of those out. Here are some of our social links. Again, we will be passing this deck along to people after the webinar, so feel free to browse any of this content and reference material in the future. And with that, I will turn it back over to Stuart.
Well, thanks, Steve. Yeah, we've had some great questions come in, but before we jump into those questions, I hope you can join us for our next Tech Talk with OCP, coming very soon, as well as W Media's launch event, very exciting for Digital Realty's South Korea data center launch, and that's on the 17th of June. You can register and find out more on w.media/webinar. So we hope you've enjoyed today's show. And if you want more, you can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, or visit our website, w.media, for the latest technology stories, market insights, and digital events. So now it's time to put your questions to our experts, and we've had some really great ones. Lots of similar themes coming up. So largely around the questions for DC Connect as well. So what are the different skill sets needed to transition from legacy vendors to OCP switches? And we had another question similar to this that said, with limited network resources in their organization, in the question askers organization and software engineers, what do you recommend for those that have these limited network resources and software engineers? And that's for DC Connect. So Jonathan and Michael.
Sure, I'll grab this one. So in terms of skill set, what you need to adopt this, you need to have a few spare heads that are able to work on it. And if you're really constrained on resources, you know, I'd recommend reaching out to any of the folks that were listed on the last page, or DC Connect, about how to help enable that leap. That's if you don't have the resources on hand. So we've actually found ourselves, since we've developed this, focusing more on working with other carriers and enterprises to enable their networks than we have on actually selling our SDN solution. So we found it to be a big driver in developing open standards between networks. So what our platform has actually turned into is more of a marketplace between different SDNs. So on the DC Connect platform, you could purchase a service that started on the A end from Megaport and terminate on Z end to a Console Connect or Packet Fabric. So we've really found ourselves caught in the middle because of our high adoption of the OCP standards as well as the MEF standards. So we try to speak to our network and everybody else's network in a very standardized way. So we can certainly help point you in the right direction on how to develop that. And if you need help with the outsourcing or enablement of your network, we also have a team of consulting engineers that can help you make that pivot.
Thanks, Michael. And we got some great compliments as well to DC Connect, saying that it's great to see organizations being able to transform. And our last question is, what sort of problems or challenges have you encountered during your way, like bugs or interoperability issues, and what have you gone about to solve these issues?
Okay, yeah. So originally we relied on the vendor switches and the vendor software to control our network, which doesn't support the interoperability between vendors. But after we moved to Cumulus and EdgeCore, we had to write our own control plane automation system using DevOps tools like Ansible, Python, Git, Vagrant in order to control the network, because Cumulus doesn't come with an SDN controller by default. However, Cumulus is based on Debian Linux, which makes it very simple to do automation using the DevOps tools I mentioned. And also, all the network configurations are stored in plain text files, which also makes it very simple to do the automation. I'd say as far as the problems or the difficulties, all our developers and engineers will have to relearn the iOS-based networking command line interface, and we have to embrace the Linux way of doing things using configuration files, which is quite a big change. But in terms of automation, it's really much better to be able to use the network configuration files and treat the network not as one monolithic entity where you chip away at it by typing commands, but by setting templates of configuration files, and then you just input parameters to that template, and it will propagate the change throughout the whole network, which ties in with our orchestration software, which basically does the same thing, but through our self-service portal. So I think the effort that we did to reproduce all our functions from the vendor controller to our self-written SDN controller have paid off, so it makes it much easier to automate the network.
Great,
yeah,
thanks,
to
John.
expand on what Jonathan said, what we found to be a huge benefit is really particularly the use of Ansible. And what that's allowed us to do is to not have to jump in 100% on day one and cut the entire network over, but it allowed us to still communicate with our H3C boxes as we started deploying new POPs. So it really kind of opened our eyes on how to operate in a more nimble way. And even those problems that we originally had in the original state, we were able to fix some of that on the legacy boxes because, like Jonathan said, we started thinking about how to write a config file in a good playbook or template, and then just tweak the parameters to get what you want.
Great. I think that's a really detailed answer, and I'm sure that's answered the question of those sort of solutions that we can do for open networking. I think we have time for one more question. So this is quite a broad question, but if you've got any answers to this, does OCP have any standards in open networking, and what are those standards that you adhere to?
So OCP is not a standards body. What we are is a framework that allows a community to operate collectively on writing specifications. And those specifications can be quite detailed around certain devices, or they can be a bit broad. The idea, again, our focus is to have one specification and then have multiple manufacturers go out and make a similar product to that specification that allows then people like DC Connect to have a multi-sourcing strategy if they so choose. And it's that ability, and that's what customers like. They like the ability to have a multi-sourcing strategy, but not a hybrid type of strategy where I'm buying a bunch of different products. They like a similar product based off of a similar spec, and then doing all the things that DC Connect can do on top of a commoditized hardware platform. So we're not a standards body. We operate, again, as a technical nonprofit foundation. We do not take IP. So we allow people to operate and contribute specifications under a patent non-assert framework. It simply allows people to take others' IP, reiterate, communicate it back into the community to drive that pace of engineering.
Great, thanks, Steve. And I saw the article on the value of OCP, and it's in its billions. So it's great to see how a community-driven network can really take over and digitally transform. So thank you for all joining us today, and thank you to all our speakers and to Steve from OCP. We had over 100 online with us today, which is fantastic, and lots of engagement, lots of questions, some great questions as well. We'll make sure to follow up on any of the unanswered questions, but I think we got through most of them. And check out our website for an article that I'll be writing on a wrap-up on this. So if you're interested, we'll email you the recorded version of this event to share with your friends and colleagues. And you can follow OCP and W Media at our websites or on our social media for more news and upcoming events. And if you're looking to transform your business by enhancing your digital marketing strategies, W Media can help you build your presence with our vast network and collaborative partnerships, just like this one with OCP. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for joining us. I'd be really excited to hear your future successes with open networking. And who knows, I might even write an article on it. So take care, everyone. Be safe. Always stay open-minded to new opportunities that might come your way. So long, everyone.